A roadmap of our futures, our wishes. Heath's life. Conversation with Cathy Hunt and Heath, Lynne Tomasa, University of Arizona Sonoran UCEDD. Created by Corey Cummings, University of Arizona. Funded by Arizona Developmental Disabilities Planning Council. Over the years, Heath lived with his father, stayed in a townhouse next to his mother, and now lives in a home he shares with his mother. They talk about what the future may look like.
Over the years, what have you learned about Heath and planning for his and your future?
I've learned that what I thought I understood he would want is not necessarily what he will want 10 or 20 years from now.
Okay.
We had always planned on him moving to Dallas when I was gone or when I got very old and could not take care of us. And now he's kind of questioning that because he'd have to leave his friends. And so it kind of, every year, our plans change a little. It's kind of like, what's more important, being close to family or staying in a familiar place where you have many, many friends?
Okay. I remember a visit I had with both of you,
Uh-huh.
and we were talking about the plan to move to be closer or with his other brother, Jason.
Yes.
And he talked about watching a news program where either it was a tornado or hurricane, and that information sort of helped or triggered something within him where he wasn't so sure about the move. Do you remember that?
I do. It was December of 2015. They had a horrible tornado, and their house actually was damaged in the tornado, and it was very frightening. And so that made Heath think twice about living somewhere where they have tornadoes.
How has Heath sort of changed as he has gotten older as well?
Um, oh, how has he changed? In some areas, he is quite independent, and I'm amazed at how much he's able to, participate in and do. And in other ways, sometimes I feel like, well, I would have thought he understood that differently, or I would have thought that he could do that like 5 years ago, and now it seems like maybe he can't. Um, I'm always amazed at how every year brings changes, and often things that I thought I could predict, I can't predict anymore.
So, how does that impact the planning that both of you do together?
I think it makes it clear that the planning cannot be set in stone. There has to be flexibility and the understanding that things will change. What you think you know now in 5 or 10 years will not be a good fit necessarily.
Does this make it harder or easier to plan?
Oh, I think it makes it more difficult. It would be easier if you could say, okay, at some point you're going to move in with Jason and Tanya, and you will all live happily ever after in Dallas. But things change. What he's comfortable with now, if you age him 10 years, he may not be comfortable with that situation.
Do you have any suggestions for families who are either struggling or ambivalent about making plans?
Say, be flexible and have a plan B. If plan A suddenly, when the parents are in their 70s, if plan A is simply not going to work, have a plan B kind of penciled in somewhere. Don't try to start thinking from scratch.
Emotionally, it seems like planning can sometimes be difficult. Do you have any suggestions on how to deal with that aspect?
No, I think it's harder for the parents than it is for uh, the ones that we're planning for. I think the parents have a much harder time with it than like Heath does. I think he'll be fine when I'm not here anymore.
Has your role as mother and primary caregiver changed over the years?
Um, I would say so, yes. You go from being the one who makes all the decisions and kind of feels responsible for everything. And I have been able to slip into a more of a partnership role where before we make big decisions, he'll remind me, now, Mom, remember, a year ago we did this and that was fun, or oh no, that didn't work. And so now we're more partners, and we probably should have been all along.
What are the plans for Heath? What is what does he want and what do all of you want?
At this point, he's still tentatively planning to move to Dallas. That's if you ask him what he'll do when his mom isn't here, that's what he says. I mentioned to him not long ago, something came up and we were kind of brainstorming, and I said, what if we just moved to Dallas now? And he was so sad. He said, but I'd have to leave all my friends and my job, and I don't ever want to do that. And I thought, then you may never want to move to Dallas. If you don't want to go now, then you may never want to when it comes right down to it.
How does your other son Jason feel about Heath's plans and your plans?
They're totally for it. My daughter-in-law has a bachelor's in special ed from U of A and then a master's in education. And so they have always said, well, Heath has a room at our house. They have a fourth bedroom that they call Heath's room.
Oh, how
And
nice.
so it's just always been their plan that he would move in with them. And at one point I said, he could live somewhere other than in the house with you. And they were like, oh no, he needs to be in the house with us. So they can figure that out later when I'm not around to try to help. He talks to Becky every evening on the phone and every morning on the phone. And I always hear him say nice things like, I love you, dear. Have a good day. Call me later. So they're a good support system for each other in kind of a limited way, but it's still a good relationship. Just not, they couldn't live together. They do not get along that well, but they can be good friends. Everybody needs to have one of those Alexas. He talks to it constantly, and they're wonderful.
So he talks to Alexa.
Uh-huh.
And is it more of a friend in a friend?
Oh, yes. He'll say, I can hear him in the morning if I happen to get up before he does, I'll hear him say, good morning, Alexa, how are you? And then she'll start telling him what's going on in the world, what the headlines are, what the weather's like. And at night, the same thing. He'll say, tell me what's going on in Washington, or, what's the weather going to be like tomorrow? And she'll talk to him. It's a wonderful way to gather information, but also to interact. It forces you to have speech with someone. It's just a good tool.